And our first candidate is going to be Reverend Warnock. Reverend Warnock, are you ready for to meet the people of Coweta County?
I am, and I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you tonight, even in a virtual space. I would love to be there with you in person, but certainly this is an act of love on all of our parts. We are finding ways to connect, right, virtually through social distancing in ways that keeps us all healthy and alive. And so that has to be the first thing. I'm Raphael Warnock. I'm deeply honored not only to be here with you tonight, but to be running for the United States Senate. It's not lost on me that someone like me is running for the US Senate. It speaks to the remarkable country that we live in and who we are at our best. I'm a kid who grew up down in Savannah, Georgia, in public housing. I'm one of 12 children in my family. I'm number 11, the baby next to the baby. My mom called me the knee baby. And I'm the first college graduate in my family. My family was short on money, but long on love and long on faith. My dad and my mother taught me the value of hard work. My dad was a veteran and a preacher and a small businessman. He preached in the pulpit of his little church on Sunday mornings on Gwinnett Street down in Savannah. But he spent most of his days working as a small businessman. He literally was a preacher and a junk man. My dad used to pick up old junk cars that other folks were giving away or sold to him for a few dollars. He'd load them on the back of a truck, the mechanisms of which he designed himself, and took them to the local steel yard. And that's how he took care of his family. And then on Sunday morning, the man who picked up cars that had been thrown away preached a gospel to people who themselves felt thrown away. And he taught them that they were indeed gifts to the world and we all have something to contribute. I overheard that message and I believed it. And so I decided I was going to college, that I wanted my life to mean something, and my parents encouraged me in that regard. I'm a post-civil rights generation baby. I was born after Dr. King's death, but I have to tell you, I was inspired by Dr. King from an early age as a kid. And I decided I was going to his alma mater. I was going to Morehouse College, a school that had a tradition of training young people, not only in terms of training the head, but tuning the heart, with this idea that your life ought to be used no matter what field you're in order to make a difference. And of course, Martin Luther King Jr. embodied that very clearly. And so I often say I went to Morehouse on a full faith scholarship. I didn't know how I was going to pay for the first semester, let alone 4 years, but I graduated. Went on to get 2 master's degrees and a PhD degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York. And 15 years ago, this very weekend, I returned to my home state of Georgia to become only the 5th senior pastor in Ebenezer's history, a church founded in 1886, and has always had activist preachers sitting at the helm. I've spent the last 15 years working on issues that I care about. I've been fighting for healthcare because I believe that it is a human right. And it is something certainly that the richest nation on the planet can and should provide for all of its citizens. So when President Obama was working to pass the Affordable Care Act, I was talking about it in my pulpit and in the public square. And when Georgia refused to expand Medicaid, leaving 400,000 Georgians in the Medicaid gap, I stood up by sitting down in the governor's office and refused to leave. And I and 39 or 38 other activists was arrested fighting for healthcare, laying it on the line in the best of the activist tradition. I thought that was a small price to pay for me to go to jail for a few hours when I thought about my fellow citizens in the Medicaid gap, folk who weren't poor enough to get Medicaid, but were too poor to afford private insurance. And all Georgia had to do was check yes and say, yes, we'll expand Medicaid in this state. Now we're dealing with COVID-19, and we've got over 500,000 Georgians in the Medicaid gap. Moreover, 7 of our hospitals in the last 10 years have closed, in part because we refused to expand Medicaid, and 2 more have announced that they will close. We need a senator who will bring a moral message to the framing of our public policy discussions in this nation, who knows how to bring people together across racial lines, who knows how to build multiracial, multi-faith coalitions with people who claim no faith tradition at all, but are people of moral courage. We need a senator who will stand up for ordinary people who feel like no one in Washington is looking out for them. I've spent my time doing that work. And that's why in 2017, I went to the US Capitol. I had not yet been elected a US Senator. That's going to change in just a little while. But I made my case along with other activists in the rotunda of the US Capitol. And in 2017, you remember they were giving a $2 trillion tax giveaway to the richest of the richest of the rich, while taking money away from the Children's Healthcare Program, from SNAP, from those who need it the most. And so I stood in the US Capitol before anybody elected me, before I was even thinking about running. I had no idea the seat would be available this year. I stood up in the Capitol because it's right. And I said then that a budget is not just a fiscal document, it's a moral document. A budget says who we think is important and who's not, who matters and who doesn't. And that if this budget that you all are getting ready to pass were an EKG, it would suggest that our country has a heart problem. And so we came to shake the conscience of the nation, and the Capitol Police arrested me again. I'm running for the US Senate because I want to give the Capitol Police one more opportunity to escort me. This time, not to central booking, but to my new office as the next United States Senator from the state of Georgia, the greatest state in our union, so that I can fight for health care because I care about it. Fight for voting rights because I believe that your vote is your voice and your voice is your human dignity. Along with Stacey Abrams, who has endorsed me, I've been registering voters for years in this state. We've registered 400,000 new voters through the New Georgia Project, which I've chaired. My church has raised money to bail poor people out of jail who were there not because they were dangerous, but there because they couldn't afford to bail before seeing a judge. I've organized to fight for criminal justice reform because all of our citizens have to believe us when we say equal protection under the law. And so this is just some of the work that I intend to do. Certainly, we've got to fight for our planet and leave a planet that's worthy of the promise of our children. I'm a dad. I've got 2 small kids. They're going to be all right. You know, chances they'll be okay because their dad is well educated, and I've been able to make a life of myself. But in a real sense, I know that my children will not be okay until other people's children are okay. And so I hope that the people of Georgia will give me the great honor of representing them in the United States Senate. And you have my promise. I'll work hard every day. I'm grateful that as we have been crisscrossing across the state, people are hearing our message. We're gaining momentum. And I'm the front runner in this race, not the front runner among Democrats. I'm the front runner, period. And I think people are responding to our message. And we have the endorsements of elected officials who see that grassroots movement, and they are responding to that. And so I'm grateful for President Obama's endorsement. I'm grateful that Jimmy Carter, who turned 96 today, endorsed me. I'm grateful that almost every Democratic state legislator in the state has endorsed me. And so I'm happy to be here with you tonight and happy to respond to any questions that you might have.
All right. Reverend Warnock, again, thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear you at the last state dinner we had in 2019, where you gave the invocation. And I was one of probably about 500 people that came up to you and told you you should consider running. So when you are elected the next senator, I'm going to go ahead and take a small piece of that credit. But so one of the questions that Chair Pilgridge is going to take, and for Mr. Tarver and Mr. Lieberman, if y'all are watching, you can expect a similarly worded first question if you take them. So Reverend Warnock, you announced today that y'all took in $12.8 million in the last quarter. Can you let everybody know how that's, what that money is going to be used for, what we can expect to see out of you, and how that prepares you for that fight, not just in the first election, but probably in a runoff coming up in January?
Yes, we raised $12.8 million this quarter alone, and I'm proud of that. I'm a first-time candidate. I think it is a vote of confidence from people, because we have among that $12.8 million is 500,000 distinct contributions or contributors. And so that is also important. It suggests the breadth and the depth of people's investment in this campaign, because they know that we can win this race. It takes money to compete statewide. I wish money wasn't so important in politics, and that's something that I hope to address when I get to the Senate. But know that my values are there, which is why I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. So so let me say that's what's not in that number. There's no corporate PAC money in that number. And it's support all across the state, and also from people who know how important Georgia is. I hear what you're saying about the runoff, and so we're raising money, getting ready for the runoff, because you wouldn't be very smart if you didn't prepare for it. You got to prepare for the runoff, because if you end up in it, you need to be already getting set. But I would like to win this race outright, and we're working hard to do that. And here's why. That became very important 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, when Justice Ginsburg passed away. The Supreme Court is critically important, and it seems that they are determined to bulldoze their way through this nomination process. If we continue to gain steam and momentum in this movement, and I can win this outright, I think it's remarkable that I'm ahead of Kelly Loeffler right now. She's the richest member of Congress. She spent millions of dollars, and I'm ahead of her. If we can win it outright, because it's the special election, I get seated right away, which means there is a conceivable scenario in which I'm sitting there voting through this nomination process during the lame duck, depending on when the nomination comes up. So, as well as other issues. So we've got a lot invested in this, folks, and it's my sincere hope that I'll be able to represent the people of Georgia at this important time.
Thank you for that answer, Reverend Warnock. And kind of touched on it a little bit, but kind of that second follow-up question. Again, if we have time for 2 questions, this is going to be very similar. Like I said, I'm a military veteran, like Jimmy Carter, a great Naval Academy graduate. But one of the things that we're taught to do is to look forward and see what the dangers are ahead. From my perspective, the danger is if we elect Joe Biden, when we elect this great slate of senators, but we have a 6-3 Supreme Court. Reverend Warnock, can you give us an idea of what steps you would want to see pursued to try to bring some of those Democratic policies, not just to the president's desk, but also so that they can survive the inevitable Supreme Court challenge?
Well, I think we have to work really hard to bring people together. I think folks have a hard time imagining that, because our politics have become so toxic and so deeply personal these days. Folks waste no time, leveling personal attacks. Too often our politics is more about the politicians than the people. And so what I hope to do is bring the empathy and the spirit of a pastor to the work of legislation and the work of public policy, and not to demonize people who have a different point of view than mine. I intend to be robust in my representation of our values, but always to insist upon the humanity of my opponents. And I think that at least gives us a chance to to get things done.
Reverend Warnock, again, thank you so much for the time you've given us tonight. For the people of Coweta,